Hello to all of you who are watching. I hope you are well and staying safe. Today I want to speak with you about a special saint. Have you ever heard of Saint Mary Magdalene? She lived at the time that Jesus was alive and was one of his close followers. Her name is mentioned in the Gospels at least 12 times, more than some of his apostles. Listen now as I share her story with you. At times I may be speaking as if I am actually Mary. I came from a village on the shore of the Sea of Galilee called Magdala. At the time I lived, people's names were often associated with the town where they were from. For example, Jesus of Nazareth, Joseph of Arimathea. So I became known as Mary of Magdala, or simply Mary Magdalene. Not much is known about Mary's history. We don't know who her parents were, whether she had brothers or sisters, whether she was married or had children. All that we know of her is found in the Gospels, so that is what I can tell you. The Gospels are like small books or chapters found in a much larger book called the Holy Bible. You may have one in your home. There are two stories in the Gospels that many people think are about me. One is found in the Gospel of Luke, where he writes that a sinful woman washed Jesus' feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. However, Luke does not give us the name of this woman, so we really don't know who she is. The second story is in the Gospel of John, when Jesus visited his friends at Bethany. In this story, John writes that Mary took expensive perfume and poured it on the feet of Jesus. Some people think that this Mary and Mary Magdalene are the same person. However, people who have studied the Bible have come to believe that they are two different people. So, now we know what Mary Magdalene did not do. But what do we know about her? We do know that Mary Magdalene was a woman who was healed by Jesus. In the Gospel of Luke, he writes that, along with 12 apostles who went with Jesus, there were some women who had been healed of evil spirits and diseases, including Mary, who was called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had been driven out. Luke also tells us that these women used their own resources to help Jesus and his disciples. There is nothing in the Gospels to tell us when or how Jesus drove the 7 demons from Mary Magdalene or what those demons were. It is thought that she was suffering greatly and that others wanted nothing to do with her and mistreated her. She was most likely bullied by those who knew her. This is when she met Jesus, when she was at her lowest, when she had lost all dignity and control, when she had nowhere else to turn and no one who cared about her. And we know that when Jesus looked on her, he saw her as a child of God, God's beloved daughter. He looked beyond her outward appearance and actions and saw the goodness of her soul. He had mercy on her and cured her, driving out the demons and forgiving her. We hear in other stories in the Bible that when Jesus cured people, many of those who were made well went off and told everyone they met. But not Mary. She was so filled with love and gratitude for all that Jesus did for her that she never left him. She followed him and became one of his disciples. She must have been a woman of some wealth because Luke tells us that she used her resources, her money, to help support his ministry. What we know from this story is that Mary's encounter with Jesus changed her life forever. She left her home to follow him. She willingly gave of what she had to help him evangelize, to spread his message. How much her being there and her service, her willingness to sacrifice, must have meant to Jesus. The most important references in the Gospels to Mary Magdalene come at the end of Jesus' life. Both Matthew and Mark write in their Gospels that many women were at the crucifixion who looked on from afar. These were women who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Among them was Mary Magdalene. John in his gospel is just a little different, as he writes that Mary Magdalene is one of the women standing at the foot of Jesus' cross along with his mother. Yes, I was there. I could not leave my Lord after all he had done for me. I believed in what he taught us. I believed in him. While most of his closest friends ran away in fear, I could not. So I gathered my courage and followed him as he carried the cross. I watched helplessly as he was nailed to that cross, and I saw him suffer and die. I was close enough to hear him as he spoke to his mother. I witnessed all the events of that awful day, and I listened with a broken heart to his bitter cries and watched through those dreadful hours until at last the Roman soldier thrust his spear into my Savior's side and declared him dead. And I cried until I could cry no more, for I did not yet understand all that he told us. I watched as Jesus' body was taken down from the cross and given to Joseph of Arimathea. I saw them carefully wrap the body in a linen cloth. I followed as they took him to the tomb in a nearby garden and laid his body inside. Then I sat for a while along with the other Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. It was so hard for me to take in all that had happened. I felt helpless and empty, filled with sorrow. After a while, I went home with the other women to help prepare the spices and ointments to anoint the body. But due to Jewish laws, I would have to wait until after the Sabbath was over to complete this task. It was early in the morning of the third day at sunrise when I arrived at the tomb with Mary, the mother of James and Salome. We were bringing the spices that we had prepared. We wondered who would roll the stone away from the entrance to the tomb. When we arrived, the stone was already removed. I went in to look for the body of Jesus, but it wasn't there. Suddenly, we saw two men, angels, in bright, shining clothes. We were afraid and sank to the ground. They told us not to be afraid and that they knew we were looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who had been crucified. They told us he was not there, but had been raised from the dead. We were told to go and give a message to his disciples that he had been raised from death and is going to Galilee, where you will see him. We quickly ran to the room where we knew the disciples were hiding, and we told them about the empty tomb and what the angel told us. But they didn't believe us. So Peter and John rushed back to the tomb with us to see for themselves. It was then that they believed and went back to tell the others. But I stayed at the tomb crying. I wanted to know where Jesus was. Looking again in the tomb, I saw two angels dressed in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been. They asked, "Why was I crying?" And I asked them, "Where have you taken my Lord?" Then I turned around and saw someone standing there. I thought he was the gardener. He too asked why was I crying and who I was looking for. I told him, "If you took him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him." Then he said my name, Mary, and I knew it was him. I knew it was Jesus. He was alive. I wanted to rush and hold on to him tightly, but he told me to go and tell my brothers and sisters that he was returning to my Father and your Father, my God and your God. I, a woman, was the first to see the risen Lord. I, a woman, was the first to be told to go and announce the greatest good news ever proclaimed. How quickly I ran through the gates of Jerusalem to tell the disciples that I had seen the risen Lord, to tell them that he's alive. This is an honor that can never be taken from me. I, who had been rejected and despised by those around me, was the first chosen to receive the message from his lips. This is all we know of Mary Magdalene, that she was a woman from Magdala who was healed by Jesus, that she followed him as a true and faithful disciple, that she witnessed his death, and that she was the first to see the risen Lord. While this may not seem like much information, it is more than enough to show how much Jesus values and loves the women who are faithful to him. He entrusted her to be the first to announce the good news of his resurrection. This is why St. Augustine called her the apostle to the apostles. There is much to be learned from Mary Magdalene. We learn the importance of the role of women in the church. We learn to be faithful, to be true disciples, to be witnesses to Christ, to be strong and courageous, to be generous, to be obedient. These are all the things used to describe Mary Magdalene. So think of this saint when you feel lonely, when others tease you or call you names, when you think you can't do something hard, or when you're asked to share. Remember how Jesus chose her and how he chooses you to spread his message of our redemption and his love for us. What happened to Mary Magdalene? History doesn't really tell us, but the Greek church maintains that she went to Ephesus with the Blessed Mother and died there, and that her relics were transferred to Constantinople, where they're preserved. However, according to a French tradition, Mary went to France with Lazarus and other companions where she died. There are also a few legends about Mary Magdalene. These are stories that were spread about her in the early church, but we don't know if they're true. There are a couple regarding eggs. One has it that when Mary Magdalene went to the tomb to anoint Christ's body, she took with her a basket full of hard-boiled eggs, perhaps to share with the other women as a meal while they waited for someone to roll away the stone. It is said that when Jesus appeared to her, the eggs turned bright red. Another version has the eggs changed into rainbow colors. If this is true, these would be the first Easter eggs. Another tradition says that after the risen Lord had ascended into heaven, Mary Magdalene went to Rome to see the Emperor Tiberius Caesar. It was the custom for those seeing the emperor to take a gift, and Mary took an egg. She scolded Caesar for the crucifixion of Jesus by his governor Pontius Pilate, and handed him the egg, a symbol of new life, and said, "Christ is risen." And Caesar replied, "How could anyone rise from the dead? It is as impossible as it would be for that egg to change from white to red." According to the story, as he was saying those words, the egg turned blood red. These legends of Mary Magdalene and red-colored eggs are said to have produced the wonderful tradition of painting eggs at Easter time and presenting them as gifts on Easter Sunday. There are also many beautiful pictures in the Eastern Church that show Mary Magdalene holding a red egg. The egg can be considered a symbol of the resurrection since it signifies new life. The hardness of the shell is like the tomb. Mary Magdalene was the first to see the risen Lord, turning her sorrow and grief into wonder and joy. So think about this when you crack open an egg next Easter, a symbol of new life breaking forth, leaving the empty tomb behind. We remember St. Mary Magdalene on July the 22nd. In 2016, Pope Francis elevated this remembrance of St. Mary Magdalene to a feast day, like the other apostles. By doing this, he recognized the importance of her role as the apostle to the apostles. She is equal in status to the male apostles and an example and model for all women in the church. St. Mary Magdalene is the patron saint of converts, repentant sinners, pharmacists, women, hairdressers, and others. I hope you've enjoyed watching and learning about St. Mary Magdalene. Think about her today and pray to her to help you learn to share and to love Jesus as she did.